Hey there, just before you jump onto this webinar, make sure you click the subscribe button and also click the bell icon so that you're notified of all future trainings. Now let's get into this one.
Hey guys, welcome. Good afternoon. Thanks for taking the time out to join me on this webinar where we're trying to cover what you guys need to do before the end of the financial year, especially in regards to CCS. We'll kick off in a few moments, just waiting for a couple more attendees to come through. Just a little bit of housekeeping from this side. If you guys can see, I'm going to share my screen with you now. Perfect. Okay. Thanks again for joining me for this afternoon. In regards to the end of CCS year, the checklist, more or less, it's basically what we want to be able to do is run you through, I guess, a few things whilst we've got a bit of time before the 30th of June, just to do some quick administrative work that'll save you some headaches in the lead up to the end of the financial year. Now, the next half an hour, we'll go through some of the 5 topics I have in front of you. So we'll go through why it's important to check your absences before the end of the financial year. 2, making sure that you've submitted all your sessions correctly for the balance of 2022. Thirdly, and probably the most important thing that we need to do is remind families that they need to declare their income or report their income to Centrelink before the end of the financial year. 4, we'll go through some of the upcoming changes potentially that will happen at the beginning of the new CCS year. And then 5, just some more additional rule changes that could come into play as you're deciding what you're doing with your own pricing and things like that. So we won't hold any longer. Let's jump into it now. So the first thing, as you progress through between now and the end of the year, you'll start to see that the absence total for each of your families are starting to approach, I guess, the threshold levels, right? So just if I recap for you, the standard total absences you have within a year is 42, but given that all the issues with COVID through the 21-22 financial year, there was an additional 10 absences allowed for that. So you actually have 52. So all families per child have 52 absences for the year. Now, that is not including what happened across all states in January and February, where there was unlimited absences. So CCS wouldn't have counted those absences between those periods. So if a child was absent between January and February, that doesn't count towards the 52. Specifically for WA, we had there was another period where the absences weren't allowed for. So between the 3rd of March and the 30th of April, WA, again, those absences between that period wasn't counted towards your 52. We've had floods. We've had floods and things like that as well. So depending on the local area emergency that's been declared, and you can check all those if your area was affected on the DESC website. But there were periods where between the 23rd of June and the 30th of June this year, if a local area emergency was called, the absences because you've had to close, let's say you were in, say, Southeast Queensland in the areas of, say, Lismore, and you couldn't attend care, or your families couldn't attend care, those absences will not also be counted as well. So the one thing that you need to check as you go through in the lead up to the end of the financial year is this. You might start to have some parents who have exceeded their threshold of 52 absences and their CCS drops away. The only one proactive thing that you can do, and regardless of which software provider you're with, you should be able to run an absence report for each of your children that's enrolled at your service. Within Owner, if you're using Owner, there is an entitlements report you can run that will actually articulate and show you how many absences a child is on. So you'll see these little bubbles next to each child will have 22, indicating that this child here would have 22 absences, or 64. It's in red just to denote how many absences that child is has reported to CCS. So I've just got a quick question, I think. Hanishka, I might come back to you in a second if that's okay. So absences, guys. If CCS drops off for a certain family before the end of the financial year, please check their absences. That's the first thing you could do before the end of the year. The proactive thing to do there, guys, is actually to remind your parents that if they're close to the threshold, that they're at risk of losing CCS entitlements between now and the end of the financial year if they exceed the 52 absences. 2, ensure that your sessions are submitted correctly. So did I have a question around the threshold amount? So the threshold amounts for absences are 52, guys, 52. So if the child has exceeded 52, what do you need to do? You actually just need to inform the parents that their CCS will actually drop away. Unfortunately, yes. So CCS will no longer pay CCS entitlements if you've exceeded the 52 absences for the year. The second thing to do is to ensure that your sessions are submitted correctly for this financial year, so 2021 to 2022. So why this is important. So at the end of each CCS year, Centrelink do 2 things. They look at how much CCS you've been paid throughout the year. And number 2, they look at the family's income at the end of the year. Okay. So at the end of the year, Centrelink will look to balance the family's account. So that's looking at all the sessions that have been submitted and the family's income. To save yourself some headaches, guys, make sure you go back and you submit all your sessions to Centrelink. That way, that ensures that the parents and yourselves are receiving the right amount of subsidy. Now, there are a couple of different reasons why sessions may not have been reported to Centrelink to begin with. Now, the most common scenario that we get here at Owner is a family started, you've had to enroll them, but they haven't given you their CRN details, and they may provide that to you 1 or 2 weeks down the line. What that means though, if it's 1 or 2 weeks later, you wouldn't have been able to submit the sessions that child's attended for the first 2 weeks. Okay, so if you're on auto session submissions with us or with Explore or with Quick Kids, that means the sessions for the first 2 weeks for that child that's attended, they wouldn't have been submitted. So what happens is, when the parent has finally provided you the CRN, what happens is you've got to go then enroll that child and then go back and submit the sessions for that child, right? So what happens there is then CCS will then reprocess that and then pay you the subsidy. Now, the drama of not being doing that before the end of 30th of June is then if you have to declare this after the 30th of June, so you've realized it's come July 1, you haven't submitted sessions that are related to the last financial year, you actually have to go back and ask CCS for permission to resubmit those sessions. So it does cause a little bit of a headache for you then. If you have to do that and you haven't been paid CCS, when it gets back paid, it'll be paid directly back to the parent, because the cutoff to declare the amount of CCS that you receive is the 30th of June. So now in Owner, you can actually do that quite easily, guys. We do have a quick report, and I imagine all the other software providers have something similar to make sure that you can actually submit your sessions, or you've submitted all your sessions correctly. So just quickly for owner-specific customers, if you go to CCS, if you got a weekly attendance fee, I would go week by week, guys. If you want to take it back to the 1st of July. So in this case, I think the new CCS year started on the 12th of July, 2021, hit get attendance fee. What you want to be able to see is most of these will actually have ticks next to it. So this is only applicable for owner customers at this stage. If you've got a little red cross next to this specific child, all you need to do to submit that session, guys, is to hit this button here, which submits it to CCS. Okay. Now, if you're on auto submit, again, with your software provider, in most cases, in 90% of cases, you won't have to do anything here, but it's for those odd occasions where the sessions just haven't been submitted. So my advice to you guys is to go through week by week, go through your submissions and resubmit where they haven't been submitted. That way families get the appropriate amount of CCS, and you also get potentially back paid the appropriate amount of CCS as well. So I'm just going to quickly jump back here. So step number 2, guys, make sure you go back, you review all your sessions that have been submitted from the beginning of this year up until now to make sure that you've submitted the correct amount. Sorry, you've submitted the correct sessions so that you don't have to do them in the new financial year, which then you have to then ask for permission specifically from CCS to resubmit sessions. Anishka, you've raised your hands. I'm just going to give you the opportunity to ask a question if you want to now. Yeah, Joy, let me answer that question for you now. What will happen to the session report for the last week in June that can only be submitted in the first week of July? So technically the first week, so that will continue. So that will apply. So the 30th of June, so a couple of key things. The new CCS year will start on, I think, the 11th of July. So you would submit them as normal. So you would submit that as normal, and then Centrelink will just take up until the 30th of June. So it actually doesn't matter. So as long as you submit that last week of June within the first week of July, you're fine. And actually, that's fine. There is a reconciliation date at the end of True. Okay, so a couple of things there, guys, is this. So the last week of June, yes, you can still submit that in July. That's fine. And you're right, there is 4 weeks within July. But remember, the new CCS year starts in July the 11th thing, for July the 11th, 2022. So yes, they will advise another cutoff, but what I suggest to you now, if you've got the time, is I'd be asking you to review all your sessions now so that you can not have to go through that period where you have to resubmit sessions and things like that. So the key thing though is CCS or the department go through and they say, okay, you know, we've paid X amount of subsidies. So for a particular family, we may have paid $1,000 in subsidies this year. We then balance that subsidy against the income that you declared at the beginning of the year, and then we work out, or the department works out whether or not there is a debt or whether or not they've paid too little, which means that you get some of that back. So it's all a process whereby declaring your income and declaring this, making sure that your sessions in there are correct by the 30th of June is the most appropriate thing to do. Third thing, remind your families to confirm their income for the 2020 and 2021 year. There's actually 2 things that they need to do here. So for those families that haven't declared their income, for the 2019 to 2020 period, this is their last chance to do so. So they've got up until the 30th of June 2022 to report their income from 2019 through to 2020. The implication, if they don't do that, is that CCS will actually remove their entitlements. Okay, so that's for families that haven't reported their income from 2019 to 2020. The other thing, the other part of the income that they need to declare is what they earned in the last previous financial year, which is 2020 and 2021. So I'm not talking about the current financial year, which is 2021 to 2022. This is for the previous year. So the way that they declare their income is by submitting a tax return, number one, or number two, if they're not eligible, if they don't need to submit a tax return, then you actually need advise parents that they just need to contact Centrelink and advise Centrelink that they're not required to submit a tax return, but then they can just declare their income directly with Centrelink. Now they can also do that via the Centrelink app as well. Okay, so two ways to declare your income or to report your income to Centrelink is number one is to submit a tax return for the 2020 to 2021 year. And if you haven't already done so, or if your parents haven't already done so, if they have, they need to submit 2019 to 2020 as well. Like I said to you, the implication, if they don't, is that CCS will remove the entitlements and they'll have to pay full fee because they won't get CCS until they've done so. So two things that occur at the end of the year is CCS. So what you guys can do in order to remind parents in the lead up to the end of the financial year is to report their income for both of those previous financial years. The balancing of income and reporting of income is obviously something that is just usually engaged with Centrelink and the parent, but the only proactive thing that you guys can do is to remind your parents that they have to report their income, with the implication that if they don't report their income, the CCS entitlements will be removed. So again, if you're using a piece of software like Owner or Explore or StoryPart, the best way that we've probably advised customers you can put up a post asking your parents to declare their income. So that will obviously appear for them to see. The other thing you can do obviously is to send them an email, or you've got SMS capability within your software, you can do that too. Now, the government itself, if you have trouble explaining the balancing of income and why it's important, the Department of Services Australia, have released a really good video that you can actually share with your parents as well, which removes the need for you guys to have to explain that. So again, if you put up a post, you put up a link to this video, and I'm happy to send this link out post the session. It's something for parents to watch, and I'll explain why they need to report their income. Now, a couple of things just so that you guys know it happens at the end of the financial year. Two things get reported. Obviously, your parents, the amount of subsidy that they pay, that they receive gets reported, and then that gets matched off with their income. Okay, so at the beginning of every CCS year, CCS determines that based on the income that's been reported for the prior financial year, this is how much CCS a family should receive per child. Okay, so at the end of the year, when they look to balance the income against the subsidy, they work out whether or not a family has received too much subsidy or they've received not enough. Now, each week when CCS gets paid out, you'll see as part of the child's entitlements, if parents haven't adjusted it, is this thing called the withholding, which is generally it's about 5%. What happens with that 5%, guys, is if CCS at the beginning of the year said has overestimated how much subsidy they've paid you based on the income that you've provided them. Let's say they work out that we've given you $300 too much subsidy in this financial year. Parents are then obliged to pay that $300 back. Now, where to soften the blow a little bit is this is where that 5% withholding comes in. So that $300 with the 5% withholding may reduce what parents owe in terms of debt back to CCS. So with the 5% withholding, let's say they've accrued, say, $200 within that withholding, parents only have to pay the difference of the $100 because CCS was overpaid to them. Now, the contrary also happens as well if CCS has underestimated the entitlement that's payable to you based on the income that you supplied. So let's say they've only paid parents $700 in terms of CCS, but they were eligible for, say, $1,000. The 5% withholding, again, that the $300 will then get paid back to you. So anything that's more or less than the withholding gets either paid back towards a debt or gets refunded back to the parents when they've actually submitted their tax returns. So the key step here with this one is two things. So if I go back to the previous point, submit your sessions or make sure that you've submitted every session for every child since the beginning of the financial year, number one. Number two, ask parents to confirm their incomes at the very least for 2019 to 2020 and 2020 and 2021. If they report that, the implication again of 2019 to 2020 is that CCS would just stop the entitlements if you haven't reported it. The implication for not reporting 2020 to 2021 has an impact on what CCS pays you next year or estimates your entitlement for next year, for your next financial year. Okay, so our proactive message to you guys is, if you can, post out a message on your software or on email or on text, explain to parents what they have to do before the end of the year. If not, obviously the implications are that either CCS stops or CCS, your entitlements may not be what they should be. Just want to quickly check the chat here again. Yep, that's completely up to you guys. Like if this is more of an administrative process, that's fine, but it's up to you guys. If you prefer not to ask parents about their income and declaring their income, you should just be aware that, again, it does affect what their entitlements are, and if they haven't declared their income for 2019 to 2020, then CCS just stops. So I understand your view there without having to chase up parents, and they're being chased up enough, but again, that's completely up to you. If the child exceeds 52 absences, does their entitlement drop away or only stops for days that they are absent? Let me confirm that one for you. Catherine, if parents wanted to pay the full fees, do we still submit sessions? Yeah, you do. Again, under the family law that governs the CCS system, yes, you actually have to submit all those sessions. Okay. Okay, so coming into the new financial year, we do get quite a few questions. We do get quite a few instances where services are looking to adjust their fees. So when you're adjusting your fees, the one thing that we always remind services to do is to make sure that you're checking that fee against the hourly cap. So one thing for you guys to understand is CCS is actually paid on an hourly basis. Again, There's sometimes a little bit of a misnomer whereby services believe that CCS is paid based on the sessions, based on how long they've actually attended for, which is correct. But the actual CCS money that you receive or families receive is actually paid by the hour, right? So in centre-based care or for children that are below school age, the current hourly cap is $12.31. For children that are of school age or maybe attend OSH services, the hourly cap is $10.77. Now, we've obviously got a table in between that covers family daycare and in-home care. The important thing to remember here is, let's say your current fee is $120, right? And the family attends a 10-hour session. That's $12. That's $12 per hour. So you're well and truly under the hourly cap. There's no additional, other than the slight gap fee that parents would have to pay, there's no additional out-of-pocket expenses that are payable by their family. Let's say you move from $120 per day or per 10-hour session. And let's say you've gone to $130 now. Over a 10-hour session, that's $13. So CCS will pay you maximum up to $12.31 for that subsidy, for that hour. What it means is, for the difference of $13 per hour and $12.31 per hour, is that the parent will have to pay the 69 cents per hour out of pocket. So if that child attends a 10-hour session, it'll be 69 cents multiplied by 10 hours. That works out to be an additional out-of-pocket expense for the parent of $6.90 for that one session. If they attend 3 days that week, they're possibly out-of-pocket $21, right? So understanding the hourly cap is important, because as your fees increase, they could have an impact on how much more parents pay out of pocket if you exceed the hourly cap. Now, there's a couple of things in here as well, because sometimes some services offer both centre-based below school age care, and you also offer over school age care. So where you might have situations in families whereby the hourly cap for a younger child is $12.31, and you might have the hourly cap for the other child at $10.77. So it's important when you're looking through why you're not potentially receiving the amount of CCS that you expect to. Sometimes it's more than likely than not, it's related to the hourly cap. So again, the one thing I'll leave you with here in this particular scenario is that if you're looking to adjust your fees and you're mindful of out-of-pocket expenses for parents, just check back with the hourly cap. And for this current CCS financial year, again, it's $12.31 for below school age, and for school age children is $10.77. Now, these are subject to change. I think previous CCS financial year, the hourly cap for a below school age child was $12.20. So it might be adjusted in the new year. On that note, the new CCS financial year, as we're talking through that, will begin, and this is what we've been advised so far, it's going to be on the 11th of July. Right? So one thing I'll leave you with here is, if you're adjusting your fees, just make sure you check it back to your hourly cap. Sorry guys, I know there's a few chats going there. I'll do my best to answer some of these questions post when I get through this last point here. Check for any new changes to rules in the new CCS year. Look, there's not a whole lot of new rules that are coming in, except for the fact that, so earlier this year, the government had a new policy for the additional child. So if you had more than one child attending service, you can get up to 30% extra CCS for the second child, for the first child. So, sorry, additional child. So what happened is there, guys, is come July the 10th, CCS will go back and look back over the last 26 weeks and see if a family has had 2 children enrolled. So, and then if they'll check attendances and things like that. So if they find out over the last 26 weeks where if there was not applicable 2 children, they'll remove the CCS, or sorry, the additional subsidy for the second child. Okay, so that now that doesn't mean, just to be very clear, CCS won't go back. CCS won't go back and remove any additional CCS that you've received from March the 7th through to July the 10th. So when they put this policy in place, all CCS was doing was they were going into, I guess, parents' profiles, and they're looking to whether or not they had 2 children enrolled in services. If they had 2 children enrolled in services, and that's what it said on their MyGov, then they just added the additional CCS. Okay. They didn't check whether or not the child was actively attending, whether the enrollment was seized. They just said, if there are 2 children enrolled under this particular one primary carer, then here is the additional CCS. What happens is, as of the new CCS financial year, they will go back 26 weeks and check for attendances for the additional child. And if they see that there's only 1 attendance that's been consistent over the last 26 weeks, then they'll remove this additional CCS in the new financial year. But they won't go back and take anything away, but they will adjust it for the new financial year. Look, the other question that we've been getting more recently is around changes to, I guess, what happens with the new government coming into play as well. At this stage, again, you guys would know a little bit, as much as we do here. We know that any changes with the new government coming in is to provide cheaper childcare overall, right? So, but most of those changes won't be effective until the 1st of July 2023. So we're about a year away from seeing any of the increased subsidies for parents at this stage. Now, that could all change, but I know from everything that's been released so far is that any changes to the CCS system won't come in until the 1st of July. They may change that, they may bring some of that forward. That's one thing, so slightly higher subsidies for all families. The second part of what they're trying to do is come up with a universal entitlement, which is what you've been seeing in the paper around having CCS paid out at the 90% level for everyone. Again, that's work that they need to do over the course of the next 12 months before they can enact that. So the first part is, from what we'll see from the new government coming in, won't take effect until the 1st of July. Again, that's also pending change. So I might just quickly see if I can answer. Yeah, good question. Yes, from what we've been told around absences for the new CCS financial year from the 11th of July, yes, it does revert back to 42 absences. So that's the advice we've been given by the department at this stage. Yes, that's true. The department hasn't advised new caps at this stage. That's correct. So right now, the hourly cap is still the $12.31 until they make the change. Now, like I said to you, in the previous CCS financial year, it was $12.20. They may increase that as they did this year, which is $12.31. So we'll have to wait and see. But for now, I guess my only advice to you, as you're thinking about maybe adjusting your fees, just relate it back to the hourly caps that are available right now. We don't know what the hourly caps are at this stage. Hey, Bindi, will the CCS be removed from the family or reverted us as a service? Probably need some more info about that one, Bindi, if that's okay. Just pop it in the chat there. Nadia, can you please explain for a 12-hour session? Yeah. So with sessions, there's always a couple of things to bear in mind. Like, let's say if we use a scenario whereby, so families have 2 things as part of their entitlements, right? They have the percentage of the subsidy, and they have hours in the fortnight. So let's say on a 12-hour session, let's say your fee was $120. That's only 10 hours. Sorry, that's only $10 per hour. So you're well and truly underneath the hourly cap there, which means you'll get paid for most of that. Based on the percentage, you'll get paid up to the $10 that you charge per hour. Okay. Let's say again, if you change your fees to $130 and you divide that by 12, you'll get, let me work that out. 130 divided by 12 is $10.83. So again, you're still under the threshold. What you need to balance that off with is a 12-hour session. Let's say the child attends 3 days a week. That's 36 hours a week. And over the fortnight, it's 72 hours. So long as you stay, and if the child has entitlement hours of 72 hours, then you'll get your maximum CCS. But let's say that child has only got 50 hours, right? So parents will have to, CCS will only pay you a maximum of 50 hours of CCS, and then everything above that in terms of care, you won't receive CCS for, which means there's additional out-of-pocket expenses per month. So that's what you've got to bear in mind. So you can toy around and make sure that you're under the hourly cap by having higher session hours, in 12-hour sessions, but you need to balance that off with actually how many hours a family is entitled to over the course of a fortnight. Because if you exceed the amount of hours in the fortnight, again, parents actually pay out of pocket for any additional hour that they attend care over the entitled hours that they have. Yeah, okay, thanks, Bindi. CCS took it from you and they were leaving us. So unfortunately, what happens, Bindi, is they take it away from you, which means then you would actually have to chase the families for the amount that they've taken away, effectively. Because what happens, Bindi, as well is if they've taken it away from you, you then have to chase parents for the full fee. Because if there's any adjustments that happen, CCS and parents resolve it with CCS. CCS is more than likely paying it back to the parent directly. So again, yes, you do have to chase the parent for that one. Yeah, it's going to be rare, Bindi, that they actually back pay you directly, to be honest. So how do you avoid it from happening? Well, there's not much you can do other than actually encourage your parents to actually declare their income. There's actually not a lot you can do. Again, there's not much you can do. I mean, that goes back to your policy on how you collect your agreement with your families, right? So again, in terms of just advice, generally, when we speak to customers and advising them, we usually obviously advise them to hold at least a bond. So hopefully that the bond that you hold them whereby things like this, where they leave your service or CCS is reverted and they dispute that, then you can actually take it away from their bond. But there's actually no way that you can kind of avoid, if CCS is taken away from you, you actually have to, the onus is on you, unfortunately, to chase your families on that. The only measure that we can say to put in place is just to have a bond in place. Some of our services don't refund the bond until about a month after the child actually leaves the service, just to make sure that if anything is retracted, they can just take it out of the bond and then refund parents the amount that's remaining from the bond. Joy, there is a way. There is a way in terms of being CCS paid to parents. So if you go to CCS, if you go down to session subsidy, you can pop in the date that you're referring to, pick the child, you click get session subsidy. Now the notation that you'll see is most of the time you'll say CCS is paid to the service, as in the recipient. Quite often, not quite often, but you will see some instances where the recipient will say the words individual. That means that's been paid back to the parent directly. So there is a way that you can actually see that by child, or you can actually go through and do it for all children if you wanted to. Again, Bindy, unfortunately, it's one of those things where you actually have to directly follow up with the family. Yeah, because again, any amendments to CCS, especially if it's been retracted from you, you will then have to follow up that with the parents. So that's all I kind of had this afternoon. Now, thank you for spending time with me this afternoon. Now, there are a couple of things that we can try to help out with. If you're looking to understand a little bit more around CCS, we do have a CCS course. If you guys want to sign up to that, have a look through that. That does give you a really good understanding of the basics of CCS, how entitlements are calculated, talk you through the hourly cap, what happens at the end of the year with CCS balancing. For those services that are looking just to remove a little bit of admin as well, we do offer an account administration service here as well. So if you're doing CCS with us, or if you're interested in just removing some of the admin noise, we can certainly help out with that as well. In the PP. Yes, we can send out the checklist to you, no problem. So I think we've got a list of registered emails that we can actually share the end of year checklist with. And then look, guys, if the information I've presented today is actually universal, doesn't matter which software provider you're with. There are just practices in place that you can just use regardless, right? So again, if we recap that, check your absences. Submit your sessions. So check your absences, submit your sessions. Make sure you remind families and parents to declare their income, especially for the 2019-2020 financial year. Again, they can do that by submitting a tax return or speaking directly to CCS, and they can do it on the the Centrelink app as well. Okay, so submit a tax return or declare it through Centrelink directly. Check your hourly caps if you're looking to change your prices, and or just have an understanding of some of the new rules that are coming in, especially for the additional sibling. Is there notes from today somewhere that I can access? We are recording this webinar, guys. We are recording this webinar, so we can have it available to everyone that attended today. Karen, can you turn the admin assistance on and off as needed? Let's take that one offline, depending on what you need to do. I won't promise you anything, but we try to tailor our services as best we can. Anishka, I'm going to give you permission to ask your question. Anishka, you've raised your hand. Feel free to ask your question. Okay. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate you joining us this afternoon. Now, before you leave, happy to have more of these sessions. So what we're going to try to do just generally is provide you with some general information about what's going on in the sector. So we'll run a lot of these sessions as we get news coming through. We will share all these webinars with you along the way. If you actually have topics that you want us to discuss, feel free to send them through to us. Hit us up at social@owner.com.au. feel free to let us know what topics you want us to cover, and we'd be more than happy to cover them. We may not be the experts in some of this stuff, so we can invite people on this to have a chat with us as well. So, but what we'll do over the course of the next coming months and weeks is try to keep you informed as much as possible. As you would have seen over the course of the last year, a lot of changes can happen, and they can happen quite quickly. So we'll be try to be at the front of this stuff. Again, please let us know if there are any topics that you would like us to explore, and we'll certainly try to make that as available as soon as we can. Really appreciate the time there again, guys. Thank you so much, and we look forward to speaking to you guys soon.